Hello and welcome. So today we are going to be doing our How to Use Your Scraps class number 9. And I've been asked to bring in our Envelop Punch Board. So the We Are Memory Keeper Envelop Punch Board and show how to use it. So many of us have this in our stash, but we just never pull it out to use it on a regular basis. So let's bring this out and let's find some new ways to use it. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to grab an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper and I'm going to trim it down so I can make a few fun things with us today. So the first thing is some of the measurements on your Envelop Punch Board may not be accurate. Some of them came out with a different measurement for a A2 size card. It was 8.25 by 8.25. We found that it actually works better with an 8 by 8 sheet of paper with your first score line at 3.5. What I've done is on the back of my scoreboard, I've added those measurements there. And then I've also taken a Sharpie and adjusted them on the front of my punch board. So if you have a punch board that has those old measurements, that might be a good thing to start with. So with our piece of paper, the first thing that I want to do is I want to cut at the 3-inch mark on our paper. So we're going to cut 3 inches off. The reason why I do that is that I generally travel with a smaller paper trimmer that doesn't have the full 12-inch. So I just need to get that paper down to a reasonable size that will fit into my paper trimmer. We've cut that first 3 inches off, and then we're going to take a 1/2 inch off of both sides of our larger sheet. So this was 8.5 by 8.5. We're going to bring that down to 8 by 8. Then we're going to come over to our 3 by 8.5 sheet, and we're going to cut it down at 5 inches to begin with. So we're going to cut that at 5. Then we're going to cut a 1 inch, a 1 inch, and a 1 inch. With one of those 1 inches, you're going to cut a 1 by 3 and a 1 by 2. That 1 by 2 and one of those 1 by 5s is just extra. These two are going to be used to make our bow. This last little piece here, we're going to cut off 2.25 inches off this. It's easier to cut it off when it's a large sheet than waiting till the very end to cut those off. We're going to use one of those for our bow. We're going to take the extra one and use that as scraps. And then we're going to use this for a tag. So we're going to have a tag. We're going to have a bow. We are going to have an envelope. And then we're going to get one more sheet of paper and we are going to trim that down into our A2 card base. So you take your 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, you cut that in half at the 5.5 inch. We're going to score that at the 4.25, and we're going to use this to make a file folder. This other one will be a card to go inside our new envelope that we just made. All right, let's get started. So we're going to pull in our Envelop Punch Board. Now to use this, the instructions that I've written up say to line this up at the 3.5. So down here on our measurements, it's 8 by 8, and we're going to line up our score line at 3.5. So we're going to take this and we're going to line it up at 3.5. You are then going to punch first. So select punch. We're going to pull out our score tool, which is nice and handy right here. And then we're going to come in here until we find that score line, and we're going to use this little groove to score all the way down our piece of paper. We are then going to turn our paper 90 degrees. Now the directions are here on the scoreboard in case you forget also. But we're going to line this score guide up right here with that score line we just used. We're no longer using the measurements at the top. So line that right up so that score line sits right on top of that score line we just made, and punch again. Just going to continue scoring along. Remember, you very light on that score line, turn, line up, and punch. And away we go. Once we have our envelope fully punched, then we are going to place it in this top. At the back side of the top here, there is a corner rounder. So that will help corner round all of those edges. So we just come in and we corner round. Once all those edges are corner rounded, then we're going to bring out our score tool and we're going to fold on all of those lines and burnish. Come through, fold and burnish, fold and burnish. Now, this is our envelope. All we need to do now is come in with our glue. We can add a little bit of glue. I generally add it to the flap and not the inside so we don't glue that shut. And then simply fold that up. Now we've got our envelope made and ready to use. So I generally like to also just burnish slightly with my scoring tool, helps that glue adhere. And there we go. All right, the next thing on our list is our tag. So to make our tag, This is something that we usually use a lot and make a lot in our crafts around the holidays. So we're going to take that 2.5 by 3.5 sheet of paper, and we're going to line that up, not over here on the left-hand side with the ruler, but actually right here on the inside. You'll see that we want to line that piece of paper up right with this right-hand side of the punch, and we're going to punch. We're going to then flip our piece of paper over and repeat that same process and punch again. So now we have a tag. Now, if these ends are a little too pointy for you and you want it to level out just a little bit, then all we need to do is grab our trimmer. We're going to place this in the trimmer, and then we're just going to trim off a little bit of that extra there. And now those corners are nice and even, looking great. Now, one extra thing that I like to do is then take the back end, the opposite end, and punch that back end there so to round out those corners. I'll then grab my handy dandy crocodile and punch a hole right there in the center, and I've got a beautiful tag that I can add to any package or Christmas gift around. The next thing we're going to make is a bow. So this is always fun to add a little bit of embellishment either to our tag or onto any package that we have. So we want to grab a bow. So we're going to use that 1 by 5, we're going to use that 1 by 3, and then that 1/4 inch piece that we used before. So the first thing we want to do is whatever length of a bow that we're making, we want to find the center point. So half of 5 is 2.5. So I'm going to go to 2.5. I'm going to line my paper up right here at the 2.5 inch mark, and I'm going to punch in the center. I'm then going to flip my paper upside down and over, and I'm going to do the same thing, line it up at that 2.5 inch mark. And now I have the center of my bow. Now this one is 5 inches. I like 5 inches because then I can line it up right here on the 5 inch mark, and I can punch. I'm going to flip it over and do the back side, and again, line it up at that 5 inch and punch. I'm going to rotate my bow all the way around. I'm going to line up at that 5 inch and punch. I'm going to flip my paper upside down so I get the bottom side, and I'm going to punch. So now I have this wonderful little bow. I can use my scoring tool to help make the fibers of the paper roll, similar to what we used to do with our scissors and that wonderful ribbon. Just going to roll, roll, roll. And actually I should have done it the other way. Let's do it the other way so we don't have the measurements on there. And then we're going to bring those two centers together, and now we've made a bow. So we can grab our little glue gun here, place some glue right there in the center, and we can now glue that together to make our bow. I'm going to also add a little bit of glue to the front, and this is where that little 1/4 inch piece comes in. I'm going to take that 1/4 inch piece. It helps finish this off. I'm going to wrap that all the way around. Again, add a little bit of glue. And because it's the back side, I'm just going to be a little lazy and tear that piece off. Same thing, a little bit of glue, wrap that around, and just tear that back piece off. Now we have a beautiful bow that we can add on top of that tag. Perfect. But it is missing the base. So let's create that base. So with this 1 by 3 inch, I flip this upside down. So again, I want my measurements on the bottom. So whatever you want to show up on the top. And I'm going to line up this with the center of my punch. So I'm going to line that up right there in the center. For mine, I'm going to try to line it up right there with the score and punch. That did a really good job. So I know when I flip this over to get the bottom side, if I do the exact same thing, if I line that edge up, this 1 inch, we'll do the center right there, line that up, and now I've got this. Now this, also, again, this was a 3 inch, so half of 3 inches is 1.5. I'm going to line this up at the 1.5. Again, line it up at the 1.5. You can do this before or after you punch those. Now I can glue this right there in the middle, and it's got a beautiful base for this to sit on. We've got a bow, we've got a base, but I love making banners. I love making those fishtail banners. I do them all the time. I add them to my cards. So doing the same thing, I've got this extra long piece here. Actually, I think we had a shorter one. We do. We have a 1 by 2 inch. I can come in with my scrap, do the same thing, line it up right there with that side and punch. Now I can grab my scissors, because I do banners on my tags all the time, but I always have this big little notch right there in the center. So if I want this to be a little more pointy, I just trim off each of those edges just slightly, and now I've got that wonderful banner that I can add at the top of any of my cards. So this is a great way to make those banners really quick and fast. Add those to the top of your card and away you go. All right, so the last thing that we want to make is a file folder. So I love having file folders to store all of my craft supplies in, but sometimes they're just not the right size. Like, I love to take my embossing folders and store them in a file folder, and it's wonderful to have that, but they're not always the right size of my envelope or my embossing folder, so I have to make my own. So let's make our own today. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna take that card base, this is an A2 card size, and we're gonna take this and put this in our envelope punch board. The first thing we wanna do is align the left edge, so this very left-hand edge, we're gonna line that with the center of our punch. So we're gonna line that so that side is gonna punch off right there. So we're gonna punch that out. I'm gonna then move this over. I like about a 3-inch tab, gives me plenty of room to write anything I want on it. And I'm gonna punch right here. So this remainder, all of this remainder over here on the right-hand side is going to get trimmed off, okay? So I'm gonna trim that off. But sometimes I like my tabs to be on both the top and also on the bottom, but I don't want them to be in the exact same location. I want them to be staggered. So to do that, to do a stagger, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna flip my paper upside down and I'm gonna do the reverse. So I'm gonna start and I'm gonna do the 3-inch first, and then I'm gonna move my paper over to the left and I'm gonna punch right there at that right-hand side. So now this time I'm gonna trim off this piece over here. So we're gonna grab our paper trimmer. We're gonna pull this in. Oh, here's all of our extra. That we can let go. I'm gonna line this up right here where it goes, so I know right where that's gonna start. I'm gonna line this up. I love using the Fisker's tool for this, or one that I can see, so that way I can quickly and easily come in and see where I'm gonna line in, where I'm gonna sink my blade at. I can then pull that extra piece and pull that out. I can then turn around and we have this extra piece over here that we're gonna get rid of. So we're gonna do the exact same thing. I'm gonna line this up. I'm gonna sink my blade and I'm gonna trim that extra piece off, and away that goes. So now I have a file folder for the front and a file folder for the back. I can have whichever one I want on the front or back. So now I can write my notes and say, what do I have stored in this file folder? Well, those are the 4 projects that I wanted to share with you today. So we have an envelope, we have a beautiful tag that we can add on to any presents. We have this bow with a little bonus banner tag, and then we also have a file folder. I hope you guys enjoyed today's little envelope punch board class. I will look forward to seeing you again in our next scrap class. Take care.